Once, I wrote the history of Tsushima. Now, I write of the battle for its survival.
With its engaging narrative, expertly crafted combat system, and innovative open-world design, Ghost of Tsushima easily cemented itself as one of Sony's best first-party games of the past generation on its release, and I don't think anybody would argue that it didn't feel like a complete package. Nevertheless, Sucker Punch took it upon himself to dramatically expand the Ghost of Tsushima experience with Legends, a co-op multiplayer expansion, taking the base game's incredible combat mechanics and placing it into a distinct supernatural setting. The narrative of Legends is told from the perspective of Gyozen, a storyteller detailing his interpretation of the events of the main game to Tsushima's locals. Gyozen believes the Mongols are actually Oni, demons in Japanese mythology, and that the invasion has been orchestrated by the demon queen Io. To fight back this malevolent force, there is not one, but several ghosts, supernatural warriors sworn to defend the people of Tsushima and foil Io's evil plans. One of the most striking elements of Legends is its art direction. Its ash-white skies, dreamlike environments littered with ink-splashed paintings, and a stylized color palette gives Legends a very distinct look both from the main game and really any game I've played before. This is accompanied across all game modes with a narration from Gyozen, who comments on your actions throughout gameplay, whether it's getting a headshot with your bow or assassinating an enemy from above.
This guy brought death.
Players can take part in a variety of mission types, including 2-player story missions, 4-player wave-based survival missions, and a 4-player raid. Both the story missions and survival missions have 3 difficulty options that unlock as you level up your gear, adding new objectives and more difficult enemy types. There are 4 distinct classes to choose from, each one specializing in their own playstyle. The Samurai, which focuses on direct combat, the Hunter, which specializes in archery, the Ronin, which acts as a support class, and the Assassin that focuses on stealth. Each one has their own unique special move, as well as a choice between 2 class abilities and several technique perks to choose from as you rank up that let you customize your build. Completing missions reward you with gear, including your sword, ranged weapon, charm, as well as 2 ghost weapons. Every piece of gear has a key level, and the average of your selected gear determines the key level of your characters. Difficulty levels have minimum key requirements, and since the vast majority of gear can be used by any class, you don't have to start from scratch if after 20 hours you decide to change classes, and can jump into the layered difficulties to rank up faster, which for me at least encourage swapping between classes regularly. You can also reforge gear using the game's various currencies to raise their key level, which changes their perks, and then re-roll a specific perk to customize the gear to best suit your playstyle. Each class has their own unique character customization options, including armor, helmets, and masks, most of which are imported from the single player, with a few given a supernatural reskin. On closer inspection, I noticed that the Samurai, Ronin, and Assassin's character models are actually based on Jin, but considering most of their faces covered, and the fact that equipping certain armor sets changes your character's eyes and skin completely, it didn't really bother me too much. You unlock new options by ranking up or completing certain feats, like using an item or completing a specific game mode a certain amount of times, so you're constantly given new options, and you can give each character a unique look, or make them all match if you like. There are 9 story missions in total, each split into 3 parts, and involve the ghosts investigating and eventually foiling a different element of Io's plan. Some of the missions actually reference and expand on characters from the main game's mythic tales, with the standout for me being the Curse of Ushitsune, the legendary archer whose bow we hunt down in the main game. The ghosts must assist him to break a curse confining him to Hiyoshi Springs. This was definitely a moment that made me smile, and it was very cool to fight alongside a character we'd only seen glimpses of before. New enemy types have been added in the form of Oni, most of which are upgraded versions of standard enemies, and given new abilities like teleporting, area of effect attacks, and one particularly dangerous variant, Tengu, that can fire an almost unavoidable stream of crows at you. These enemy types do a great job of injecting variety into the combat, distinguishing it from the main game while still remaining familiar. The type of Oni you encounter in each story mission is randomized, along with bonus objectives, which keeps things fresh on repeat playthroughs. New enemy types aren't the only change-ups to the combat the game adds. Certain missions involve attunements, which sees enemies imbued with the power of a Japanese deity and requires the player to imbue their sword with the same power to defeat them. Some of my favorite combat sequences in the game involve large groups of enemies with different attunements, requiring me and my co-op partner to each focus on specific enemies and then change attunements to deal with the rest. Controls have been slightly altered from the main game. Instead of selecting a ghost weapon with R2 and the directional pad and then pressing R1 to use, you hold R1 and then press one of the face buttons. This change is to accommodate the fact that since you're playing with other people, the game can't slow down to let you select one. But considering how much quicker it makes accessing different ghost weapons, I would have liked to see this control scheme integrated into the single player. Ghost weapons are also on cooldowns rather than ammo, which encourages using them as soon as they're available, as opposed to the main game where I rarely ever use them. And since a vast majority of sword types are locked to a specific stance, you're even more encouraged to use ghost weapons to break enemy guards. There are 4 wave-based survival missions, requiring players to defend 3 areas with 15 to 25 increasingly difficult waves, depending on the chosen difficulty, with every 5th wave being a boss wave that adds more Oni and a random modifier. Losing an area removes a chunk from your health bar until the end of the next boss wave, and decreasing the amount of currency you get to spend on power-ups, like regenerating health or summoning spirit animals. Teamwork is essential, especially if you want to complete the various timed bonus objectives that activate randomly every few waves. The more variety in your team's classes, the better, though given their ability to revive teammates at a distance, the Ronin is the only class I would say is essential, especially on higher difficulties. The game also includes a bonus 4th difficulty. Only for the most skilled players, Nightmare Mode sees 1 story mission and survival mission each week, packed to the brim with the game's most difficult enemies. While the story missions are more than doable with the right partner, survival mode lives up to the Nightmare moniker, with not only overwhelming numbers of Oni, but also flaming arrows regularly raining down from above. It can feel unfair at times, but there's nothing quite like that feeling when you're the last player standing, 1 hit from death, gaining just enough resolve to unleash an ultimate attack and finishing off the wave. The 3rd game mode for Legends is a 3-part raid, which was added 2 weeks after launch in order to allow players to level up appropriately for it. Continuing on from the story missions, it sees the ghost's journey into Io's realm to defeat her once and for all. The art direction shines particularly bright here, especially in Chapter 2, with its massive chasms littered with giant statues, which to me had a very God of War 3 vibe to it. There is no matchmaking available for raids, requiring you to organize a party with other players, which when I heard I thought seemed a bit unnecessary. The game's ping and quick chat system have been mostly sufficient to communicate, and a kind of etiquette has formed between players without microphones, with games often beginning with a bow. But after finishing the raid, I completely understand why. Communication is crucial, since a majority of the raid is made up of puzzles, often requiring precise coordination for platforming sections, or specific player positioning for combat sequences. Objective descriptions can be a bit too vague, and cause players to be stuck in areas for literally hours. For example, one objective read "Stop the Blood Ritual," which led to our team experimenting with where to stay, how many people should stay there, whether or not we're supposed to kill enemies inside that area, or keep them away from it. After more than 2 hours, we managed to complete the objective and move on, albeit without a clear idea of what specifically we had done to achieve this. This was the most egregious example of frustratingly unclear objectives that we unwittingly completed, but by no means the only one. And judging from the various Legends communities I'm in, this seemed to be reflective of everybody's experience, though this issue is pretty much exclusive to early players, and will gradually go away as players become more familiar with objectives. And I have to admit, when you do work together as a team and definitively figure out what you're supposed to do, it can be immensely satisfying. There's also a pretty big length discrepancy between the chapters. Chapter 1 took 2 hours to complete on my first run through, which I think could be trimmed down to 1 hour 20 on repeated runs. My first attempt of Chapter 2 took 4.5 hours without even getting to the end, with a second, more informed attempt taking 3.5 hours. And then Chapter 3 took 40 minutes on a first attempt, which we eventually shaved down to just over 8 minutes on a second. But again, this is something I mostly took issue with on my first playthrough, since it was hard to gauge just how long my play session would be.
I never saw my child's face. I only felt her heartbeat, fading against the pounding of the rain. Tsushima must die. Nothing else can bring us peace.
Legends kind of reminds me of my first time playing Uncharted 2's beta, a gameplay experience I distinctly associate with single player that I didn't particularly think needed a co-op mode, but after dozens of hours with it, I can't imagine the series going forward without it. And I have a feeling this is going to be a game I keep coming back to well into the PS5's lifecycle. There was a time not long ago where developers felt the need to shoehorn in a co-op mode. Games like Resident Evil 5, Dead Space 3, or Assassin's Creed Unity that prioritized its co-op gameplay to the detriment of its single player experience. But Legends is an example of co-op done right. Something that adds to the overall product rather than diluting it. And when you couple its overall quality with the enormous generosity on Sony and Sucker Punch's behalf to include this completely free and devoid of any microtransactions, it makes me wonder about the potential of a similar mode for some of Sony's other franchises. So those are just some of my thoughts on Ghost of Tsushima Legends. What did you think about it? Were you able to survive Nightmare Mode? And is there another Sony franchise you'd like to see get a similar treatment? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoy this, be sure to hit the like button, and if you're a Ghost of Tsushima fan, you should check out my spoiler review. Hit subscribe for all things PlayStation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.